excited about this journey, and I think to try to spread the word as much as we can about EOC among our colleagues and to try to give them other alternatives besides stockholder theory, as Celeste talked about. One of the things that I've sort of taken on is to try to read as many of the Italian economists who already have talked about EOC as I can. Because for some reason, Americans don't read a lot of Italian economists. And so I'm trying to bring that in, and I think that's one of our goals, could be to get the wisdom from them and bring it into our discourse here. And so that's what I've been trying to do with some of the articles I've recently been working on. I just want to share a couple of the insights that have been very exciting to me. So there's Bruni, Zagmani, Crivelli, and
Crivelli.
Luca. Switzerland, actually, and Andringa. So these are some that have really impacted me. You sometimes get academically, you have what you call academic crushes on certain people. Bruni, I've really been excited about Bruni, especially in Creighton. So I want to share a few of the things that have really made me excited. The Wound and the Blessing has been one of the most powerful books for me to read in recent years. And Bruni, I think, sets up very well the EOC. There's two things I want to share. One is, he sets it up in terms of unfettered capitalism on the one hand, where you have this freedom to do whatever you want to make as much profit as possible. And on the other hand, sort of anti-capitalist socialism. He brings up the French in particular. And he says these are both extremes, and the EOC is a civil economics in between, a civil economy. And it's because we do take from capital, we don't throw capitalism away. It's private enterprise is what's helping drive this to solve social problems. So we're concerned about society and community, as the socialists are, but we're using private enterprise to solve that problem. And so that unity together of those two different strands that overcomes both of them, in my opinion, is what makes it so powerful, what the EOC is about. It's private enterprise. It's economy of communion in freedom, right? Because we want people to have freedom. In all the papal encyclicals, which speak about, since the 1800s, when they talk about private property, they say, you must have private property. They're anti-communist, anti-Marxist in the sense of having communal, no one owns anything. So you have to have private property. And so private property is part of what gives us freedom, it's part of what gives us dignity. And so we want people to be able to have their own property and to have the dignity of that through the enterprise. So that's part of our goal. So that was one idea from the way that he sets all that up is very powerful for me to think about conceptually. But also then just the concept of the wound and the blessing. And that so often in business we have policies and procedures which we need, but we often use those to shield ourselves from dealing with persons. And so I said, well, I'm sorry, it's nothing personal, it's just our business policy. And we use those policies to keep ourselves from being really in the messiness of people's lives. We have a lot of homeless that are mostly homeless alcoholics who work with us. That's our employees for the most extent. And when you get involved in the lives of homeless alcoholics, your life gets pretty messed up too. And so we've had to deal with that, right? I've had cars impounded that they were, all kinds of crazy things that have happened, dealing with these people that are my friends and are really part of our family. And so your life gets messy, you get wounded, but there's blessings that come from that as well. If I had policies about employee behavior, none of them would work for me after a week. But I don't have those kind of policies. The Pope has spoken about we can't go just based on meritocracy. Even the poorest of the poor need acorns. And so how do we help them? And in structuring a business in such a way that you don't just have merit-based achievement, you help them anyway. It's a different way of doing business altogether. And so that, the wounds are worth it because of the blessings. And I think the more that we remember that as EOC entrepreneurs, the better. So those are two things from Bruni. You know the quote from Pope Francis about economy and communion, but I'll read it anyway. These are two words that contemporary culture keeps separate and often considers opposites. Two words that you have instead joined, accepting the invitation that Chiara Lubich offered you 25 years ago in Brazil, when in the face of the scandal of inequality in the city of Sao Paulo, she asked entrepreneurs to become agents of communion. She invited you to be creative, skillful, but not only this, you see the entrepreneur as an agent of communion. So that's powerful, I think, for us to have a vision of that we're agents of communion in the world. And we know that even before, Francis has been very supportive, I think, of EOC, but even before that, in Benedict's work on Caritas and Veritate and the vocation of a business leader that came from that, speaks very clearly. There's an EOC imprint, there's lots of fingerprints of the EOC on that document, that we enter into communion to make the world better for all. Other concepts that arise for me when I'm trying to explain the EOC to my students, one is from the Pope again, the culture of, and from Bruni's talked about this too, a culture of giving instead of a culture of having. And not just wanting to get and get, but being willing to give and that generosity. Pope Francis has talked about, we say yes to life, an economy that says yes to life instead of no to it. And so how do we do that? How do we construct that? And Dringa has talked about that EOC is a way to help correct the wrong distribution of goods. So to help redistribute some of the goods in the way that we practice our business. So that's a powerful concept too. Agents of communion we've already discussed. Zagmani does a great job, I think, of expressing three concepts for EOC. Generativity, which is an interesting concept in English. I've never heard that word before in English, but it's a translation from Italian. Reciprocity and gratuity. When I was first attracted to EOC, it was because of gratuity and reciprocity. I read that, I think, on the Wikipedia page. Like, those are great concepts. And they've been very powerful for me in thinking about how I deal with my tenants, because we have a lot of rentals, and how I deal with others along the way. But gratuity and reciprocity, there's this grace involved. And that reciprocity is responded to me. I've been in China for the last 2 weeks, and my tenants are very gracious to me because they know I'm in China. Because they also know I'm always trying to deal with them as quickly as I can and try to be. So we have a relationship. People have said, why don't you outsource your management to someone else? And I say, well, then why would I do what I do? The reason I like the relationships with people. And it's much more messy that way than to outsource it, but that's what I like. And so that's important to have that reciprocity. And you can't have that without the relationship. And that you build up grace with them. But also the generativity. It's the idea that EOC is always thinking of new ways. How can we do this in a new and creative way that will, maybe no one's thought of doing it that way because it doesn't make as much profit. We think, well, but it might be a win-win situation for everyone. And so we're willing to take risks as entrepreneurs, I think, that other entrepreneurs wouldn't be willing to take because we aren't doing it simply for profit. We're also doing it for relationship. There is a practice of business not just for profit, but for a pursuit of the common good. And so you have a sort of mega level that you're thinking of in how you're trying to run your business, and it's for the common good, not simply for myself, or even for those directly connected to me. And then the last thing I'll say in closing before we have some time for questions is from Crivelli. He's talked about poverty, and that we're trying to eliminate poverty through economy of communion, certainly by the financial poverty. But he's also talked about that we participate in poverty. And there's this choice that we make to be poor. We may not be destitute poor, but we are choosing to not have as much profit. And we're choosing to use that profit for something else than a boat or a bigger home or whatever else we might buy with that. So there's a chosen poverty that then we participate with the poor in that way. And so that's meaningful, I think, to think about how do I participate with the poor in some way by giving up some of my profit or in some other way, being in unity with the poor. I'm not as poor as they are, maybe, but I'm giving up what I have, some of my riches, in order to connect with that. And then along the lines with poverty too, we are trying to eliminate financial poverty, but I think there's other kinds of poverty. I remember a talk by Lorna Gold I watched a few years ago, where she talks about the poverty of community that people face. They're very lonely. And I see that with my alcoholic guys that we've engaged with. They're very lonely. One of them was living in his truck, Izzy, that worked for me and was a dear, dear friend of mine. Izzy was in his truck, and we started meeting every morning on the porch for coffee. And so then he had someone. He had other friends than just his alcoholic friends who are also very lonely. Alcoholics getting together and drinking are all lonely together, that's all. And so he started to have other things that would give him some joy and some hope, because he was part of a community in some way. And there's also a poverty, I think, of vocation. People don't know what they're doing. Like, what am I here for? And so you have to give them a job to do. People do want to work, as we've heard today. And so to give them work to do is part of what they're meant by God to do, is to have work in the world, to be creative like God's creative. And so to give them that vocation, it helps solve that poverty of vocation that they have. And then that helps solve maybe a more serious question, just an existential poverty. Like, in general, what am I here for in the world? Not just my job, but why am I here on earth at all? And you start to give them community, you start to give them work to do, they start to have a place in the world. My guys, when they go in, before they were homeless guys, what are you doing in the hardware store? Well, I'm here because I'm getting a toilet ring gasket for Gustafson. I work for him. Oh, you work for Gustafson? Okay. What's the number? So they have a place in society. Now they have a purpose. They're also making money to solve some of their other problems. And then lastly, we would hope, and the ultimate goal is spiritual poverty, that we're helping to solve that as well, not just financial, but spiritual. And that somehow they have a sense from this, maybe there is a purpose in the world. Maybe there is meaning that I'm part of, and that there is some plan. Providence, as EOC and folklore are always talking about providence. And so how they can start to see providence in their lives, maybe, and start to have faith. So those are things that are powerful to me as we run our EOC business, but also as I try to encourage my students to think about business in a different way as well. But now I would just like us for you to take time, if you have any thoughts or questions you'd like to ask any of the panelists, we can take time to do that, and we'll go from there. And I'm supposed to keep this close at hand. So.